Moving on to a different topic. Under the Heritage Places Act, the minister can remove or delist a place that has been provisionally listed as a state heritage place by the Expert Heritage Council. And it's happened. We know the cases of Union Hall and Maughm Church, and most recently in 2020 with Shed 26 at Port Adelaide. Yes. Do you think the minister should continue to have discretionary power to delist a provisionally listed state heritage place? Dr. Susan Close.
This is going to be so unpopular, and I hate saying things that are unpopular, but no, we don't have a policy to change that. What I can say to you is I would not have delisted Shed 26 had I been the minister. I think it's a provision that ought to be used incredibly rarely and for good reason. It has therefore, in my view, been subject to abuse in the past. But I understand that the weight of putting something on state heritage is something that the democratic process, which resides in the minister, ought to be allowed to have consideration of. And the Labor Party does not have the policy of getting rid of that.
Even though the recommendation was by the Expert State Heritage Council. Mm-hmm.
It's the Labor Party position.
Oh, well, it's consistent.
And it is for good reason, even though you can give very good examples of when it's been abused. There is a principle involved in allowing the minister to have a view. The problem is that it's been abused so frequently that I completely understand that people here have lost faith in the logic for that. And that's a great tragedy in politics.
Thank you. Honourable Robert Sims.
Look, I'm disappointed to hear that's the Labor Party position. And certainly from our perspective in the Greens, we're going to keep on pushing to change our planning system so that we put people back into planning. I think that's been one of the key problems with the planning regime that was brought in by John Rao and has been continued under this Liberal government. And that is that you have decisions being made that are often in the interests of the development sector, in the interests of developers, rather than in the interests of the community. And you have the experts being marginalised and overlooked. And I know that there was a heritage inquiry in the Parliament prior to me starting in the Parliament. My predecessor, Mark Parnell, was involved in. And one of the key recommendations there was ensuring that you actually had experts guiding this process. And that's really important for us, not to be having this power being vested in the hands of the minister, but rather being based on expert assessment and putting people at the centre of our planning process.
Thank you. The Honourable Frank Pangallo.
Thank you, Chair. No, I don't believe there should no discretionary powers with the government or the minister of the day, simply because they do and have been abused in the past. And at the same time, the ministers are usually advised by bureaucrats making the calls. And quite frankly, in many decisions that I've seen, and not just in heritage decisions over the last 3 and a bit years I've been in Parliament, I just often don't trust the judgment of the bureaucrats, because I don't believe that they actually engage more with the community, more with the experts, more with those that know about this particular issue. So Parliament, I think, should be the decider. If you're going to do that, it needs to be put to a parliamentary committee, made up bipartisan, that assesses it, rather than leaving it to a minister to make a decision one way or another.
Okay, so you're saying a parliamentary committee could second guess the assessment of the State Heritage Council?
Well, what I'm saying is, if it comes to the minister making or having to make that call, then perhaps it should be referred to a parliamentary committee.
Yep. All right. Got that. Thank you. The Honourable Sam DeLuc.
I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit. I think there probably does need to be some ministerial discretion in some instances, and we see ministerial discretions in so many areas. So to that extent, an element of planning should have that as well. But like everything, I think that the whole Act needs to be reviewed, and the weighting that we put on the final state heritage listing and the criteria for that, the criteria for provisional listing, and I think Rob made a great point, the involvement of community in those processes really needs to be included. So I think there is room for discretionary decision-making by the minister, but I think we can probably look at tightening the criteria that discretion is used and on what recommendation that discretion is used as well.
Okay, so did I hear you say you'd be pushing for a review of the legislation in any of that?
I think the next Parliament is going to be very busy. The whole planning code needs to go back to scratch. Heritage certainly does as well, because it interfaces so much. You can't do one without the other.